wish you had a crystal ball. Not to, like, tell your fortune, but what if it could actually show us the future of, like, Earth's climate?
Now that would be something.
Right. Well, that's kind of the whole idea behind these Earth System Digital Twins, ESDTs for short.
Yeah, I've seen that term thrown around, ESDTs. It sounds like something straight out of Star Trek.
Totally. But it's not sci-fi anymore. NASA and a bunch of other institutions are getting serious about building these things.
Okay, so what are we talking about here? Like, is it a super-powered weather forecast or something?
That's a great question. It's way more advanced than your phone's weather app, that's for sure.
So walk me through it. What is an ESDT?
So an ESDT is basically how do we put this? Imagine a digital replica of the entire Earth.
Whoa, the whole planet.
Yeah, like a mirror world, but made of data. And this digital twin is constantly being fed real-time information. We're talking everything from satellites to weather stations, ocean buoys, you name it.
So it's like a living, breathing snapshot of Earth, but in digital form.
Exactly. And here's the really cool part. This is where the digital twin gets really interesting. It's not just about reflecting the present, it's about trying to predict the future.
Oh, okay. So how does that work?
Well, this is where supercomputers come into play. These massive computers take all the data from the digital twin, all the real-time info, and they run incredibly complex simulations to see how all these different Earth systems might interact and evolve.
So they're kind of like running experiments, but on a planetary scale.
You got it. And because they're so powerful and have so much data at their disposal, these simulations can actually give us a glimpse into what the future might hold, especially when it comes to things like, extreme weather.
Like hurricanes.
Exactly. But it goes beyond just hurricanes. Imagine being able to simulate, I don't know, how rising sea levels will impact coastal communities.
Wow. Or like maybe even how deforestation in one part of the world might affect rainfall patterns on the other side of the planet. That's incredible.
That's the ultimate goal, right? To create a tool that doesn't just give us information, but actually helps us make better decisions about how we manage the planet.
That's a powerful idea. So it sounds like these ESDTs are incredibly complex systems. What are some of the main challenges in actually building and using them? Like, what are the big hurdles they're trying to overcome?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is data. Like, how do you even begin to gather enough information, make sure it's accurate, to create a truly representative model of something as complex as Earth?
Yeah, that makes sense. And then you have to process all that data, right? I can't even imagine what kind of computing power you'd need to handle all that information in real time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there's the modeling itself. Building these incredibly complex algorithms, these mathematical representations of how different Earth systems interact, that's a huge challenge.
So it sounds like it's a combination of needing really robust data, massive computing power, and then really sophisticated models to make sense of it all.
Exactly. So we've been talking about digital twins, all this data, these simulations, but let's bring it back down to Earth for a minute. No pun intended.
Okay.
Hurricane Milton. This storm was a beast. I mean, it went from a tropical depression to a Category 5 monster in the blink of an eye.
It really did. It was like watching something out of a disaster movie.
Seriously. What was it, like 48 hours? It intensified so rapidly, it's almost unheard of. What were some of the record-breaking aspects of Milton that you think are the most, noteworthy?
Well, first off, it became the strongest hurricane to form in the Gulf of Mexico since Hurricane Rita, which was back in 2005. At its peak, its minimum central pressure was a mind-boggling 897 millibars, which is incredibly low. To give you some context, that's like measuring the weight of 5 elephants balanced on a postage stamp.
5 elephants on a postage stamp. That's a crazy image. And you said that's low pressure. What does that actually mean in terms of a hurricane's power?
So the lower the central pressure, the stronger the hurricane. It's basically a measure of how much air is being sucked up into the storm's center.
So the more elephants on the postage stamp, so to speak,
Yeah,
the stronger the sucking action, the more powerful the storm.
exactly. And you mentioned the rapid intensification. That's another thing that was truly remarkable about Milton.
Yeah, and earlier you mentioned something about unusually warm Gulf waters playing a role in that. Can you kind of unpack that for us a bit? What's the connection?
Sure. Think of hurricanes like giant engines, and warm ocean water is their fuel. The warmer the water, the more heat and moisture a hurricane can suck up into its swirling system.
Okay, so the hotter the water, the more fuel for the hurricane.
Right. It's like a vicious cycle. The more intense the hurricane gets, the more warm water it churns up, which then feeds the beast even more.
And I'm guessing this year, The Gulf of Mexico was like a giant hot tub ready to fuel a monster storm.
Pretty much. The Gulf was exceptionally warm this year, which created like the perfect breeding ground for a storm like Milton to just explode in intensity.
So you've got this perfect storm brewing, hot water, a rapidly intensifying hurricane, and then bam, it slams into Florida. Can you paint us a picture of what that impact looked like?
It was pure chaos. Milton made landfall as a Category 3 hurricane, bringing with it 120-mile-per-hour winds, torrential rain, and a massive storm surge, that's the wall of water pushed ashore by the hurricane, of up to 10 feet in some areas. Millions of people were left without power, homes were ripped apart, businesses were completely flooded. It was devastating.
It's hard to even comprehend that kind of destruction. And it's easy to get caught up in all the meteorological details, the wind speeds, the categories. But at the end of the day, these storms have a very real human cost.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was the human toll of Hurricane Milton?
Tragically, at least 26 people lost their lives. And then you have to consider the economic impact, billions of dollars in damage, countless livelihoods disrupted, and communities facing the overwhelming task of trying to rebuild their lives. It's going to take a long time to recover from a storm of this magnitude.
It's a stark reminder that as fascinating as this technology is, and as much as we're learning about these storms, we can't lose sight of the human cost. These events have real consequences for real people.
Well said.
So we've talked about these digital twins, how they can model the Earth, predict these extreme weather situations. With Hurricane Milton's crazy intensification, I can't help but wonder, could one of these digital twins have, I don't know, given us a heads up? Could it have seen this coming?
That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, everyone wants to know if these things really work.
Right. So what's the answer?
Well, it's not a simple yes or no, unfortunately.
Figures. Science is rarely that simple.
Exactly. But these digital twins, especially the ones being developed by, NASA, the EU, they're definitely designed with this kind of thing in mind. They're taking into account things like ocean temperatures, what's happening up in the atmosphere, even the influence of, climate change, basically, all those ingredients that go into making a hurricane and, more importantly, making it gain strength so quickly.
Okay, so theoretically, a digital twin could have at least, maybe not predicted it perfectly, but flagged those conditions, right? The ones that kind of spawned a Milton. But would it be able to tell us exactly where it was going to go, how strong it would get, that kind of thing?
See, that's where it gets really, really tricky. Even with all the amazing tech we've got now, predicting something as complex and, well, chaotic as a hurricane, that's still a massive challenge.
I imagine it's like, I don't know, trying to predict where a leaf's going to land in a hurricane. There's just too many variables, right?
Perfect analogy. There are a few big things that still really impact how accurate these digital twins can be. The biggest one, data quality. Like if the information you're feeding the system isn't good, it doesn't matter how powerful your computer is. Garbage in, garbage out, as they say.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not just about having a lot of data. It's about having good data.
Exactly. And then there's the model itself, right? The algorithms, all that math that's trying to make sense of the data. The more complex and accurate those models are, the better the predictions will be. But even then, there's this fundamental limit because weather systems, they're inherently unpredictable.
So you're saying even the tiniest change, like, I don't know, a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil kind of thing, could throw the whole forecast off.
It's the butterfly effect. And it's a real thing when we're talking about weather. Even the smallest change in those initial conditions can lead to huge differences down the line.
So we can't just, throw a bigger computer at the problem and expect perfect hurricane predictions.
I wish it were that easy. But that's not to say that digital twins aren't incredibly useful. Even if they can't tell us exactly what a hurricane will do, they can give us a much better idea of the possibilities, Like, here are a few different ways this could play out, and here's how likely each one is.
That's still incredibly valuable information, especially for things like disaster preparedness, planning evacuation routes, even just helping people decide if they should board up their windows or not.
Absolutely. And that's ultimately the goal, right? To use these tools to be better prepared, make more informed decisions, and hopefully mitigate some of the risks that come with these extreme weather events.
Couldn't agree more. But I think we need to address the elephant in the room, or maybe I should say the hurricane in the room, and that's climate change. It's not just some background noise anymore, right? It's playing a major role in how these storms form and intensify.
Absolutely. It's a huge factor.
So let's talk about Hurricane Milton. How did climate change influence this particular storm, its intensity, all of that?
Well, researchers who studied Milton, they determined that climate change actually made its rainfall significantly heavier. We're talking like 20% to 30% heavier. And its winds, they were about 10% stronger because of climate change.
Wow, so without climate change, this storm would have been significantly less severe.
Yes. We're talking less flooding, less wind damage, and ultimately less impact on people's lives.
It's a sobering thought, isn't it? That we're not just observing these changes in the climate, we're now experiencing the very real and often devastating consequences.
It's the unfortunate reality, and it underscores the urgency of addressing climate change. It's not just an environmental issue, it's a human issue.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a fascinating, albeit somewhat terrifying deep dive. We've gone from this mind-blowing idea of a digital Earth to the very real and very human consequences of a changing climate.
It really highlights how interconnected everything on this planet is, and how the decisions we make today will have ripple effects for generations to come.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. As we continue to develop these incredible technologies, these digital twins that can model and predict our world with increasing accuracy, what will we choose to do with that knowledge? How will we use it to shape a better, more sustainable future? That's something for all of us to think about.